Hey guys, hopefully you're seeing this right now. This is Danny Mouncey, aka Dr. D with telescopes.net, and I want to say hi to all you guys. I know this is a really strange time for all of us, and we're sorry that we couldn't be at the NEAF show this year. And I want to say hi to all my friends on cloudy nights. We have so many great friends, and we appreciate all the support. And we're still working in full force at the store, so we're still doing mail order at telescopes.net. We're just temporarily have our doors closed at the moment, so you can still visit our site. You can still place orders. We still have an active crew over there that's taking care of the orders that we need. And this year I'm going to be talking about Takahashi, and it's kind of fun to talk about a product that I genuinely love, and you guys know that I do. I talk a lot about it. And this year there's going to be some sales, and the sales for Takahashi are only going to run through this weekend till April 6th. So any orders that you're going to do, you want to place as soon as possible. Don't wait afterwards, because they're not going to be able to honor any special sale prices. You have to do it by April 6th. To get the special 10% off. So the telescopes that are going to be for sale are the FC 100 series line refractors are going to be 10% off through April 6th. And then also the Epsilon series, which are the Epsilon 130 and the Epsilon 180. And there's also going to be some special sales in some of the accessories as well. But what you'll want to do is visit our website for some of the details on the special sales that we're having. And we're going to have sales on a lot of things. So this is going to be a different time for us. So we're going to be doing a lot more videos, and hopefully some of my friends are here watching and chiming in. But first thing I wanted to tell you about is this whole history that I have with this brand, this Takahashi brand. And it's kind of a funny thing, because back in the 90s, when I used to observe at Mount Pinos, and back in the early 90s, we didn't have the internet. So basically, this was my internet. And a lot of you who have been in this industry for many years are familiar with this old Backyard Astronomer's Guide. I think it was published in 1992, and it was co-authored by Terence Dickinson and Alan Dyer. And this is basically my internet. And the thing that was so fascinating about Takahashi to me is the way it all came about. And in those days, we didn't have the selection of refractors that we have now, or the selection of product. And the industry has so much amount. There's so many products now; it's just overwhelming. And so there was like Nikon, you had Zeiss, and in the 80s and the 90s, you had Astrophysics and Takahashi, and that was about it. So it was really a special thing for me to acquire the telescopes. And I remember having no money and just acquiring my first one. So it was really, to me, it was special to acquire one of those. And so we did a lot of observing at Mount Pinos. And that's kind of how that whole Takahashi thing evolved with me, and why I fell in love with the brand. And I mean, I genuinely love this stuff. And there's reasons why, and I'm going to share some of my own personal experiences using this product. And I will tell you, I have a little bullet point list here of things that I'm going to cover here. And the first thing I will go into is I'm just going to tell you about the mounts. Takahashi has several different mounts. The ones in particular I want to talk about are the Themis series, which are the EM11, the EM200, and EM400, which fundamentally all work the same. But the reasons that I, particularly like these mounts and actually have these mounts myself for my own personal use is the quality of the build quality and the reliability of it. And also the simplicity of it, which is so good. We have some comments in here, it looks like. I just want to make sure I'm not. Wow, there's people from all over the world chiming in. This is really, really cool. Thank you so much, you guys, for chiming in, and we appreciate everything, especially through this difficult time where we're going to be doing a lot of online stuff. But with regard to the Themis series mounts, I'm just going to go over a little bit about them, so that you know what they entail. The EM11 is basically for telescopes like say if you have a Milan 180 or an 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain, it's about just approximates I'm giving here, approximately a 20-pound load capacity, whereas the EM200 is about 40 pounds, a little under 40 pounds. And it's realistic. That's been my experience with it. And then obviously the EM400 goes up even higher still to hold even heavier payloads like the Milan 300 or the TOA 150, which is extremely heavy 6-inch refractor. And I'm going to go into some of the details about the refractors. But the thing that is so astonishing to me is the mechanical quality and accuracy. And one of the criticisms you may have seen, and I have like a toy table, what we call a toy table next to me. And this is just a hand controller on mine. So when you buy a TOC mount, this is an earlier model on a Tema. This is from my own personal stash, okay? The newer ones look very similar to this, but fundamentally they're all the same. It's a dual axis controller. And the thing that is different about this is that you're just using this controller and it's got no brains in it. So the scope, one of the criticisms that people have given these mounts is that there's no computer-aided handset. And I've told many of my friends, and I'll repeat this again for those who don't know, the reason that I do like these mounts is because they do not come with hand controllers, computerized handsets. And as a result, there's no brains really in the mount other than, the encoders. They have stepper motors, extremely smooth, very well made. It's like a fine pocket watch. And so you couple these mounts with Sky Safari, at least is what I do. So the way that works is I'm just using my smartphone here, okay, which I'll use with Sky Safari. And the reason I like Sky Safari is because the database is so extensive, it's so powerful. I'm very heavy, and those of you who know me on Cloudy Nights, I'm very heavily into viewing carbon stars and double stars and planets. And I have a very long history of 25 years experience doing that. And if you use catalogs, I use Burnham Celestial Handbook as my primary guide, so you'll understand this. And in these old books, they have a catalog of stars, Struve numbers. There's several different names of star catalogs in there. So I could punch in any one of those names into Safari, the program, and it'll have Safari for each star will have several designations for each one, which is amazing. So it doesn't matter if I put in SAO, WDS, Struve, it'll bring it up. And that's what's nice about it. Hand controllers on conventional telescopes, on computerized telescopes, have very limited databases or may just be comprised of just the SAO catalog. And you need a cross-reference because not every double star listed in the books or references I use go under the SAO name. They go under other names and types. So basically, to use Safari, there's two options you can do. And what I have here is a serial cable. This serial cable comes with the mount. So it looks like this. Okay, this is what it looks like. So it plugs into the mount like this. Okay, then what I would do is I would plug the end of the SkyWire. Now I use what's called a SkyWire with my iPhone, or you can use it with an iPad. And you just plug it into here, it plugs into the mount. And I have the older model, but I have an adapter here to make it to work with the modern input here. And that's how you plug it in. The other thing on the mounts, and I have a lot of things to cover, so I'll try to get through this as quickly as I can because we have a limited time in here. You have to accurately polar align, and that's another thing that's astonishing about these mounts. The polar scopes are really beautiful. They're very accurate. Now, you can use a polar app. You can download for your one with your phone. You can, and they have different polar reticles for different mounts. And then if you don't, if you don't know where or how to do it, you can just look at where the actual North Star is positioned on the reticle that you see on the polar app. But I don't always do it that way. What I do is I use the actual polar scope in the Tema mounts, and it's extremely accurate. I've tested the accuracy of it by keeping the telescope pointed at stars to see how long it would track, and it's extremely accurate. And I think if you go in the forums and read about it, others will tell you the same thing. It's very true. So the Safari doesn't have a T-point type of algorithm in it. So it's relying on the mount's accuracy, mechanical accuracy, and polar alignment to find targets. All you do is you loosen the clutch, move the telescope on the mount to a desired star. You look at the star. I'll go into a little bit more detail after. If you do a meridian flip, sometimes I'll just realign on another star, say in the Western Hemisphere or Eastern Hemisphere. There's I had a conversation with a couple of customers yesterday. I was on the phone for quite some time explaining this whole thing about meridian flips, because a lot of people that, like, want to get fork mounts where you have this mount that moves up, down, left, and right. And with a conventional fork mount, what happens is that you're not having to reposition your diagonal. So when you put a diagonal, in the telescope, and you do meridian flips, what's happening with an equatorial mount is when you do your meridian flips, your eyepieces are flipping upside down, all these precarious positions. So you'll hear a lot of criticism from visual viewers about the disadvantages of equatorial mounts as a result of doing these meridian flips. It's understandable because people start out, they want to see all kinds of objects and they're flipping all over the sky. So what I normally will do is I'll set up a workstation and set up a table and everything, and usually just look in one side, like either on the Western hemisphere or the Eastern hemisphere, and I'll stay in do what they call constellation mapping for the duration of the night. And that's how a power cable, you can run them with a conventional Celestron power tank like you see here. It's actually the same plug adapter as a Celestron, the Temas are. So you can actually use a Celestron cigarette plug adapter for a Tema if you want. It works the same. I personally still use the old alligator clips, and those of you will laugh, but I use a 12 volt 7 amp hour battery. I've been using these things for 15 years and I haven't had any problems with it. And it's just simple, it's clean, there's nothing in it. So that's just another option if you wish to do it. The other thing I'll go into here are the epsilons. I had the pleasure, and Adam Block, who's going to be talking after me, he actually has done, I got to tell you, I had the privilege of having a dinner with Adam Block at the Advanced Imaging Conference in San Jose. And man, you want to talk about world class. This guy is on another level. He won a Hubble Award at the Advanced Imaging Conference at the AIC Awards. There are several. There's ones they pick every year or every other year or whatever the show is. But just really a tremendous guy. And he uses an Epsilon 180. And I had the experience of using these. These are an unusual type of hybrid Newtonian, hyperbolic Newtonian reflectors. They have a 130 aperture, and they also have the 180. And these are fast. The 180 is a f2.8, and the 130 is a 3.3. So these are extremely fast astrographs. But one of the things I noticed when I was using it, now these things are for like APS-C sensors or medium format sensors if you want to do that. And you get these wide fields of view with these ultra fast exposures. And the thing that was kind of cool that I noticed about the scope is when I was focusing, I realized how easy it is because you're getting diffraction spikes. And so when you defocus your shards, you get double diffraction spikes if you're not in focus. And it's so easy to focus. A lot of imagers now will use what's called a Bahtinov mask, and they have programs for Bahtinov masks. And that's one of the reasons people use Bahtinov masks. I don't like Bahtinov mask myself because I find it very hard to find the focus because of the way they do it. But if you're happy with those and they work for you, then that's all that matters. I'm just checking here if there's any more comments here. Yeah, one of the questions was, can you use this in light polluted skies? Absolutely. Narrowband imaging, particularly with monochrome cameras, is a very popular thing now with all this LED lighting and stuff that's going on in the cities. So narrowband imaging, and I'll tell you, we have an extensive in stock. We have chroma filters. Check out chromas, they're amazing. We have several different lines from Beta. We have, Astronomic. We have lots of filters in stock for shipment. And what's happening is that you can use the narrowband filters with these monochrome cameras and telescopes like the Epsilon to shoot from the city. In fact, my friend Mirko Mayer and I were just shooting with a telescope in my backyard, and we were overlooking I have like the worst light pollution you can imagine, and we shot a black and white image, a narrowband image of the Siegel Nebula. It was really cool, and it came out surprisingly good considering. So yeah, you can do that. So that's just one of the things. I want to make sure if I missed anything. Oh, just going back here real quick. We have what's called, on the Tema mounts, you can use there's different saddles that you can apply. We have Rayoc saddles, there's ADM saddles. I use clam rings, and I'm gonna go over that with you guys as we go through this. There's also the Baby Q, and when the Baby Q came out, it was really funny. I was laughing because there's this forum on cloudy nights called the Takaitis Forum, and everybody posts their Takahashis, myself included. And when the Baby Qs first came out, I just saw this whole thing. It's a 4-element quad flat field. It has about a 40 millimeter image circle on this thing. And it came with a little birth certificate and a little cigar. I have a picture of it. It's really hilarious. But really, these are amazing telescopes. And what they do now is they include a field flattener with the FSQ 85s. And what that does is it extends the flat field out further from about 14 millimeters to 22 millimeters. So you have to remember, if you have an image circle or something that's like 80 millimeter image circle or 40 millimeter image circle on back, doesn't necessarily mean that you're using the entire image circle. You're going to be using a part of that image circle, and you want it to be as diffraction limited as possible. That is, pinpoint stars. And one of the dilemmas we face now, and particularly in the farms, you'll hear this quite often, is that, hey, John Hawk said hi. Some of my friends are saying hi. I appreciate it. One of the things that you'll hear about are like, why, first thing imagers want to do is they want to check the corners, and there could be a number of reasons why that happens. You wouldn't believe, we get calls all the time, asking these questions. Why do I see these, can you calibrate? Some of these things, these artifacts that you see are very common. They can be calibrated out, but people are always a little alarmed when they see it, and they might have some distortion in one corner. You might have sensor tilt. Who knows what the reason is? But the FSQ is really the benchmark, and really it's really like the top of the line astrograph that's out there, including the FSQ 106. These scopes are roughly f5, both of them roughly f5. But they do have reducers and correctors, so that if you want to speed them up a little bit, you can do that. One of the things I would recommend that people do, and a lot of people get a little confused when they're looking at them, and I brought a few here. I'll just give you an example of one here. It doesn't matter. Is that you got to use these system charts, and I have tons of them printed out here. And when you buy these telescopes, there's a manual that comes with them. Sorry about that, people. Just having a drink there. The manuals, at the back of the manuals, you see what's called the system chart. And all you have to really do with these system charts is look at the adapters that came with the telescope and determine, hey, am I using a CCD camera or a CMOS camera, or am I using a digital SLR camera? And look at what's included, and they'll tell you these system charts, because people look at them like, oh my God, it's overwhelming. But no, Takahashi is like one of the only companies I've seen that has this kind of thing. And the adapters are pricey. That's one of the criticisms people have, but it's just the way it is. So what they do is you can look at this chart and determine which are the pieces that you're going to need. And I personally have used these charts for many years. I think they're just a fantastic asset. These charts have been really special for me at, assisting customers on the phone. And that's what I do a lot. I'm on the phone trying to help people with issues they may be having or dealing with. I'm just kind of checking out stuff over here just to see if I'm missing anything. No, I'm not sure what some of those are, but anyway, so moving forward, I'm going to move into the FC, the TOAs. I want to tell you something real briefly about the TOAs and the TSAs. The TOA is like the TOA 130 is the 5-inch. I personally owned and used all the scopes I'm talking about here at some point in time. And the TOAs use a double element of ED, regardless whether using the TSA or the TOA. But they're just all so perfectly color corrected. It's really not an issue. I know people like to check out all the details, and you can do that if you want to. The TOA comes in the 5-inch. There's two versions of it. One has the 2.7-inch focuser, and then you have the 4-inch model with the micro focus on it, and then the adjustable camera angle adjusters, CAA for short. So the TOAs are very heavy though. So for a TOA 130, the AM200 would be about the limit, and that's the scope you would use for imaging if you want to, the mount and scope combination if you want to do that. As far as the TOA 150, it's heavy. By the time it's fully loaded, it's somewhere around 50 pounds. The thing is just like immensely heavy, and there's a counterweight that goes in the back. And that you would need the EM400 mount. Now, there's been a lot of questions, so we get these inquiries all the time. What do I do? Do I choose between, I have what's called a clam ring. This is one of my personal clam rings that I have here. And a lot of the questions that come up which rings should I use? Should I use dual rings or should I use a single ring? I'm going to tell you why you want to use a certain one and why you don't. I use clam rings for a reason. There's a specific reason. But when you're imaging, you sometimes need to have situations where you need to piggyback accessories on top of them. And then you might, dovetails you may want to attach on there. So for visual, I typically will use this clam ring for my telescopes. Okay. Now, getting to the reason why, we have a brand that we carry called PrimaLuce Lab. They become really popular, and they're a red anodized color. And it's kind of cool because it kind of matches the color if you're into aesthetics. The TOAs have red trim, and I don't have the PrimaLuce Lab rings with me, but I'll get to the gist of this. When you're using a double ring, you're setting it on a plate like this, and you have your telescope sitting on top of it, and they have what are called riser blocks. So in some particular cases, you're going to have what's called riser blocks. And the reason you want those, and in PrimaLuce Lab, I think we have them in 10 millimeter, 20 millimeter, and 30 millimeters. And the reason you want that is to elevate the optical tubes off of the plate, so you have some leeway there, okay? The other thing too is you have to choose carefully, because when you're working with the FSQs, the tubes are really short. You only have a limited amount of space width. So for the FSQ 106s, you're going to use the 125 millimeters tube rings, and for the baby Q, the 85, you're going to use the 95 millimeter ones. The other thing I want to emphasize, and this is very important, particularly with regard to astrophotography, because you don't want to get cone error. There are some aftermarket rings, but you want to be careful with them, because what will happen is inside there's a felt. If the felt is too thick, what will happen is as the temperatures dampen, the tube rings become loose after a while, and you get a little bit of movement, and you don't want that when you're imaging. So you have to make sure you have, and that's one of the things I like about the PrimaLuce Lab rings, is the felt inside is very, very thin inside there. Now, the felt here I actually love because it's super dense. It's really dense. So you can have really good examples of felt like you see here. So just a thing to be aware of. There's also a little lock, focusing lock under the FSQs. This is a little FS 60. I actually purchased this from a really dear friend of mine. His name is Ed Ting at Scope Reviews, a really good friend of mine. And he had it, and I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." So he sent me this thing before I even paid for it. And he's like, "I'm just going to put it in the mail," but it's kind of special. It's got the original sticker from Japan on there, and then I had Hashimoto sign it. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we proceed down here. And I'm just kind of checking. Sorry, let's see. Questions here. Q and TSA. Should do 5.3. Okay, so here's what I would just suggest you do. Go to our website at telescopes.net, and we have some of the spreadsheets on there, so you can check out what reducers you want to see, because there's so many different ones to choose from, and it's going to be time consuming to kind of go over it. But there's a list of the accessories that you can use with it. So I would just suggest doing that for the time being. There's also been, I'm trying to move forward here to cover all this material. There's also been discussions about, the EDXs, why do they change all the names and everything? Fundamentally, the FSQs are the same scope. It's just that the way they change the attachments and things on the back of the scope, that's what causes you to see all these different names that you see, with the model numbers as they evolve. But fundamentally, the scopes are the same. Okay, so another thing too, I'm just going to cover something important in imaging. When a scope changes focus, the whole premise of the FSQ, they change the rear element. One of the rear elements is further in to help reduce the need for refocusing. But there have been some aficionados who do astroimage who have said that they do see slight changes in focus. So I want to explain to you why this is. This is a fundamental fact about all refractors. And what happens, and what causes that change in focus, particularly with imaging, is a aberration called undercorrection. So as a scope starts out, it's kind of weird. If you look at Fresnel patterns or you defocus a star, the outside of the star disk, it's like a pebble in a pond. You'll see these diffraction rings. They look fuzzy on the outside. Usually, there's all kinds of reasons for it. Spherochromatism, not in the FSQ's case because they don't have it, but could be the scene conditions. But what typically happens is undercorrection, just to give you an example here, is where you have light rays from the outer portion of the optic converging inwards down closer than light rays from the center, which are focusing way out here. So what happens is it takes a little time for the optics to do what we call null out. So they null. So you have the optics getting closer and closer to a null till the point where the optic itself is no longer shifting. And that in reality is what's causing your refractors to change focus if you don't know it. And you can learn this by doing star tests and evaluating and watching the behavior of scopes. I've conducted countless star tests, and I'll try to get to that if I have some time here. And I'm also going to make sure, just want to make sure. Okay, so I'm going to move into that, with regard to the TSA, there's going to be something I need to mention so I don't forget. With regard to the TSA 120s, I think there's going to be a limited run again, I think of 30 units of the TSA 120, and this is the limited edition. I think it's like $500 less or something. Check our website, and it has a non-adjustable dew shield. Also, Takahashi is going to be offering the TSA 120 with the Starlight Instruments Feather Touch focusers. So for those of you who want to make sure you have a Feather Touch focuser, this is what one looks like. And so you have a collar, that is attached to the scope. And I'm going to go into that in just a minute. But there's going to be a limited run of the TSA. Well, I don't even know if it's limited. They're offering it. So if you want to get it, you can get it with a Feather Touch. The next scopes I want to talk about here are the FC series. A long time ago on Cloudy Nights, I conducted a review called the 4-inch Hyper Shootout. You can see the full thing in its edited form in a website called drdreviews.com. That's my personal website. And I am, this is part of the Woodland Hills Telescopes website as well. It's doctordreviews.com, doctordreviews.com. And you can Google 4-inch Hyper Shootout. There's part of it on Cloudy Nights. I think it starts on page 13. I think it's the biggest 4-inch review. And I think my friends, June Trajano and Ridwan and Cass and a bunch of friends, we took a bunch of refractors and we compared them. And it's a very, very well-known review that we conducted. So I've had the opportunity to compare a lot of these telescopes and over the years. And I will just tell you, because all these questions come up in the forums constantly between which one should I get. The FC100 DF and DC are fundamentally the exact scope. They're the same optical elements, and they're both fluorite doublets. The only difference is that there's a little bit more back focus travel or room for accessories if you want to do some imaging. And as a result, comes with a 2.7-inch focuser on the DF model, which is f7.4. And then the DC has a 2.2 inch draw tube. And that draw tube is the exact one that you see here on the FS60 that you have here. The FC100 DF typically comes with a 2-inch visual back. Now, while the FC100, which I have, I think, where did I put it? There's so many things. Oh, here it is. This is the FC100 DC draw tube here. And you'll see these are both the same size. See, look at the draw tube on there. 2.2 inches on there. If you wish to convert your DC to a 2-inch, you can do that using this little 2-inch adapter and just thread that on there. And so now your DC becomes a 2-inch telescope. So you can accept, a 2-inch diagonals if you want to. And then you could use diagonals like this Takahashi that I have here that I use. This is my personal one here. The other thing, too, I want to mention to you that's really important, going back to the clam rings, too, just real quickly on this. The reason I use a clam ring for visual observation is because during the dark, there are situations where you need to put in heavier or lighter eyepieces. And as a result, you need to be able to change the balance on the fly really quick. So all I do is I loosen this one little screw, and it gives me the ability to slide the tube forward and backwards in the dark. It's a lot easier to do it when you're using this single clam ring. So for that reason, if you're doing visual, I always suggest people use the clam ring for visual. And if you want to add accessories, go ahead and do it with a double ring for imaging. The other thing too is that something I didn't mention earlier is you may want to use a Vixen style guide scope. And some of these 30 millimeter mini guide scopes that you purchase come with these Vixen style shoes. So how would you use because all the adapters and things for Takahashi are proprietary. So typically you would have to use either their quick release bracket or just screw the finder scope directly on there. But there is a way to do it. So here's the parts to do it if you wish to use a Vixen style finder, either a Vixen style finder or a guide scope. What I do is I take an ADM Astro quick release bracket, like you see here, and that part we carry, it's called a Talk FB. And it basically is this piece. The other part of it I have attached to the focuser right here. And then what you can purchase is one of these. It is a Stellarvue FB. And what this is a Vixen style shoe that you attach to the focuser itself. So I'll give you an example here. So now what I've done is I've attached this. Now you have to use the both parts because you need the riser. This shoe will hit this part right here if you don't do this. So now if I want to, I can use Vixen style finder scopes on a Takahashi telescope with this method. You see how it holds on there if you want to do that. So that's for you guys out there that may want to do that. If you want to use a feather touch focuser, or a ultra fine focuser, the DF and the DC don't come with fine focusers, but if you wish to use one, you have two options. You can use an MEF3, or there's several different brands of fine focusers you can do. But what this collar is here is for the FSQ85 or any of the FC100 DC or DF models, as well as the DLs, if you wanted to. And what's really cool about this, I had contacted Wayne Schroeder over at Starlight Instruments, and I said, man, how could we come up with some kind of method of what adapters we need to use to that's the thing, because you go to the site and you're like, God, there's so many things in here. Which one? I don't even know what I don't know. I don't know what adapter I need. So what Wayne and Schroeder at Starlight Instruments is doing, and we've been working with him on this, and I just love this, is I printed out a spreadsheet here. And he has a spreadsheet for every brand, no matter what it is, that you have. This particular one is for Takahashi. So what he's done is he's selected the brand, FC100, whatever it is, FSQ. He tells you what the thread is, and then he tells you what the focuser is you need, and as well as the adapter that you need. So to make this work, I have an adapter here, okay? All you do is you simply unscrew this focuser from the actual tube, and you put this piece on. And then you just simply take the focuser itself, and you just slide it on, and there you go. You have your feather touch focuser on your scope. That's what you want to use. The MEF series focusers, they basically retrofit to the existing focuser that's here. You remove one of the knobs and put it on. The way that you apply it, or the tension that you apply to it, it really has it plays a factor on how well it will perform. So you have to really work with it to get it nice. But for me, it's just super smooth, and it works out nice once it's attached really well. So going back to the FC series, you have the DC and the DF, and you have the DLs. The DL is an FC100 DL is basically the same scope, but it's an F9 instead. And all three of these scopes use a 95 millimeter clam ring. So it's 4 inches aperture in a 95. So it's 3.5 inch tube. How do you do that? Well, what they did, which is really brilliant, is Takahashi positioned the optical element inside there so that by the time the light cone traverses through the tube, it's kind of like the TeleVue 85. They just take the optics and it goes into a narrower tube, and you're not cutting off the light path, which is really slick. So you have this really light 4-inch scope that feels something more like an 80 millimeter scope. It's just astonishing. So the thing that's cool about the F9 is what I've noticed in my comparisons with it is it's a little bit more forgiving with any kind of eyepiece you use, whether it be like a Plössl or an ortho or eyepieces that are not corrected, like highly corrected, like TeleVue Naglers, for example, or Explore Scientific wide fields. So it's very forgiving, and you tend to get sharper stars at F9 than you do at F7.4. But as far as the color correction and which one's better, It's really, it's just splitting hairs, people. To me, it's Takahashi has gotten to a point where it's just gotten so ridiculously, in my opinion, good and so consistent that it's like, flip a coin. You couldn't go wrong with any of them. Takahashi just came out with the DZ, the FC100 DZ. The DZ uses a different secondary element aside from the fluorite to improve the color correction even further. So Derek Wong and I, my observing buddy Derek Wong, he's very well known on Cloudy Nights and scope collector himself. We experimented with one of the samples, and one of the things that really floored me is how totally neutral the color fidelity is in that scope. I have to say, it is the first doublet I've ever seen. It has virtually no color, absolutely pure white. And that was what really threw me for a loop at that scope. I was expecting to see some degree, of false color, but even out of focus, you don't see it. All these scopes, you don't really see any color, but out of focus, it's normal to see false color. You expect to see it because when you focus it, it disappears. And that scope just has none of that in it. So it's just really astonishing how well the color correction is on that. And they're very lightweight. All of these scopes are extremely lightweight, very portable. All the FCs are really nice complement with the EM11 mounts. If you want to use it on an Altaz mount, like a Twilight mount from Explorer Scientific or a Stellarvue M2, you could do that as well. Let me just look on here. Well, I would just go to our website and check that out. There's the FC100 DZ. Let me just see in here. The new model is the FC100. So let me put that in here for somebody here who's asking. Forgive me here, folks. FC100 DZ. And the DZ is, like I said, 2-element F8. Okay. It's amazing that they have all this. So one of the requests was, when Hashimoto came, says, what do you guys want? What does America want? So I'm speaking for everybody here on Cloudy Nights and all my friends. I'll tell you what I want. I want to see doublets come back. I want to see 5-inch 2-element doublets come back in fluorite. My personal scopes are FS series. I have the FS, series scopes, which is the fluorite doublets, F8s. And I hope that there will be an FC125. Who knows? I don't know. I've not been told that there is, so I don't want to spread false rumors. But it would be nice if they came out with one at some point. Takahashi would love to see that for it. So I've covered on the some of the parts here. Let me see if I missed something here. And Muon. So, wow, I could go on forever talking about the Muon series. So I'm going to go on about the Muon series telescopes and how they differ from choosing a refractor. And the only way I can do that is to explain city observing from light pollute, from dark sky viewing. When you view in a city, like I do, your object demographic changes. You don't look at galaxies in the city. You can't see them no matter how much aperture you throw at it. Your globular clusters get washed out. Your planetary nebulas, your emission nebula get washed out. All these things that big aperture really helps with, like a Muon, get washed out of the sky. So it don't matter how much aperture you throw at it. And when you're in a city and you're viewing in a city, it makes it really difficult to see any of these deep sky objects, very difficult. So I just tell people, if you're viewing in a city, you can use a refractor, start viewing double stars, get into viewing double stars. It's a lot of fun, and carbon stars. I do it. I just enjoy it. But going back to the Muon series telescopes, there's the Muon 180. These are all Dahl-Kirkham Cassegrains. There's the Muon 210, the Muon 250, and the Muon 300. There's even a 16. But for all practical purposes, the one that I really love that's portable and that I recommend it if you want to complement it with a 4-inch refractor is the Muon 180. And the reason I love this scope so much, and it astonishes me, is a Cassegrain open tube telescope. The advantage is that, say you have moisture or water vapor, you don't have to use a dew shield because the optics are way at the back of the tube down below, and then you have a spider vane. So you don't have to worry so much like on a conventional Cassegrain where you have a glass plate on the front where you have moisture on it, where you have to add all these dew shields to it. So that's one of the cool things about it. There's also questions like, what if it has a 4-vein spider or a 3-vein? So typically, if you have a 3-vein spider vein holding your secondary, you're going to get 6 faint diffraction spikes. If you have a 4-vein, you're going to see 4 diffraction spikes. That would depend on how bright the stars are that you're looking at. So not every star you see or every deep sky object you see, you're going to see these spikes. So don't be overly concerned about it. It's really not an issue. But I do use the Muon telescopes, and the one I use the most for myself is the 250. I just want to tell you a little bit about my viewing situation, because these are very sought after scopes. I think it was Carson, Doctor Who on Cloudy Night started a Muon thread, and it's just a huge thread, and it's like the premier Muon thread. And he talks about everybody that's into it chimes in and shares their experiences with Muons, and some of the accessories they recommend for it. So what I want to tell you about that scope that astonishes me is that I fell in love with it because I found myself viewing with my refractors for a couple of hours during the evening. So I'd set up my scopes prior to sundown, and I would be viewing with the refractors till about 11 o'clock while the Muons were cooling. When the Muon gets cooled down, it's an absolutely amazing telescope to view the planets with. It works beautifully on deep sky objects as well, but you can use it for imaging. It has about a 40 millimeter image circle roughly, and it's the newer models, the CRS, which is the 250, the corrected model, and the 300 are corrected. So they have an actual baffle corrector inside there to get a flat field. The 180 and the 210 are non-corrected systems, so you will see a little bit of coma. Some people don't mind it, some people do, so it just depends on the observer's preference. I have an older model, mine has coma, I don't have a corrected model, and it doesn't bother me at all. So some people, it does. I'm more focused on what's in the center, so that's all I care about mostly. But the thing that you have to understand is they require a little bit of time to cool down. And near the ocean where I view, the deltas from day to night are roughly about 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And this has consequences on how well the telescopes perform, because these questions come up all the time. How do you get these things to perform? Because you'll get people who buy them and they go into these areas where they have these tremendous deltas, these temperatures that drop up and down. And what's happening is, you imagine the mirrors, pretend this is a mirror and it's a substrate, and the mirror holds heat inside. And what happens is when cold air makes contact with that mirror, it causes what you see, what are called eddies or boundary layers on the substrate. And it causes the images to look, kind of distorted or fuzzy. And you don't want that to happen when you're actually viewing. You don't want that to distort your images, but it does sometimes. And you'll hear, particularly in the Florida Keys, the temperatures in the Florida Keys, like you'll hear about the Winter Star Party, are very subtle amount of temperature change. The deltas are so subtle from day to night. So what I recommend is check the CRWS Jetstream map. I use it a lot, and I check my jet streams. Check the NOAA, N-O-A-A, the National Weather Service. Punch in either your zip code or the city that you have, and look. They have some histograms that kind of show your temperatures from day to night, and that's what you want to look at to see how fast those temperatures are dropping, because they can sometimes plague the performance of your telescope when the temperatures are dropping so much, and that's what you don't want. And the reason it's so important is because you're paying all this money for this fine optical quality, and you want to take the proper measures to get the maximum performance out of it. So I'll sit there and I'll use a fan to cool them. The CRS 250 and the 300 Muons, they have active cooling. They have temperature sensor, ASCOM compliant temperature control, cooling fans. They will automatically turn on while you're viewing if the sensors detect that the temperature is getting, or the delta. The delta, it could be 2 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretend the substrate's 2 degrees Fahrenheit above ambient temperature. That's enough to cause some kind of currents on the substrate itself, and that's what you don't want. So the fans will stay on for a while until that kind of goes down and the thing's acclimated. And sometimes the scopes never acclimate because they're chasing this temperature that's continually going down. So some time ago, I came up with the idea of this thing called a cooling angel. I stopped selling them, and the main reason that I stopped selling these things, were for the original Milan 250s. They also work on the 300. They do not work on the 180, and they do not work on the 210. But what my coworker, one of my good observing buddies, did is named Darren Thibodeau. Is he put an adjustment control here to control the fan. So you'll see them, it's battery controlled, so it turns on and off. And it's really cool. You just remove the retaining ring from the rear of the telescope, and then you slide this thing on here and you put the retaining ring back on. And you can keep this on the telescope and let it cool the back of the telescope for, as long as you want, for an hour, a couple of hours. I let my Milan cool for a couple of hours before I even use it, because I'm using the refractors most of the night. And at that point, that's when I start viewing with the Milan through like 11 p.m. on into 1, 2 in the morning, when the atmosphere and everything's really settled down. I just want to check here. There might be some questions here. Yeah, question here is about the EM. Well, the EM11 mounts, I'm just addressing a question that was asked here. They've changed over the years just ever so slightly. Fundamentally, they all work the same as far as the way they are compliant with different software programs, whatever program you choose that you want to use. Stellarium is a free program you can control. I think you can control. I don't use Stellarium, but it's a free program you can run them with. As far as new TEMA mounts coming up, I haven't gotten any. I can't really say anything at this point until I get word as to what I can share. But things do change and evolve. I still use the older TEMA mount because I prefer the reliability. That's not to say the new ones won't be reliable. It's just that I'm a big believer in simplicity. No bells and whistles, no fancy gadgets, things that go wrong. I've been using these scopes for many years. I haven't had any problems with them. And that's why I like it's the integrity of the product and the simple build quality. So just wait and see what happens with the EM11s as they evolve. Looks like we might have, I don't know about that. Some of the questions here, some of the comments I'm not sure about. So I'm just going to tell you something about how to get optimal performance and about cleaning Mulans, because people ask, like, how do you clean a Mulan? If you look in the instruction manual, there's a few screws on the back of these telescopes. So if down the line you're concerned about, cleaning the mirrors, you can remove the mirror from the tube itself, and you can clean it. There's different methods that you could do. I use a distilled spritzer bottle over it, and I use some soap and water. And then I actually went out and purchased an air compressor that was filtered. I think you can get them on, what is it? There's some online Parts Express, I think it is. I can't remember the name of the company. But they sell these compressors for like $80. And what you can do is you can blow the little, the water deposits or calcium deposits, because what happens is the water dries on the mirrors, they leave calcium deposits. So to eliminate that, you can use an air compressor to blow off the water. But all the mirrors can be removed from the back if you have to clean the mirrors. Question then is, like, when do I clean it? And a lot of times I see people or enthusiasts who prematurely feel they need to clean their mirrors. The time to clean a mirror is when it's like a really thick residue. Like, imagine a table that's got tons of dust on it, and you take your finger and you wipe it, and it's like, wow, that's when you clean your mirror. But if you see dust particles, there's millions of dust particles in front of me right now. You don't see them, but don't worry about that stuff. Don't be overly obsessed with it. There's a lot of people that are OCD about it. And man, I don't worry about that stuff anymore. Every speck of dust, man, we'll get customers calling us, man, there's like a speck of dust. And I'm just like, at some point you got to use the scope and not worry about that kind of stuff, because you're going to see specks and stuff here and there. It's just normal. Diffraction spikes, which I think I covered on there. One of the things I just want to go back for just a second for something I forgot to mention. There's a lot of misconceptions about diagonals. I just want to quickly go over this. Why do I need a 2-inch diagonal? Why do I need 1.25 inches? It's kind of H here. I'll take this adapter out. It's a different type of adapter. I have a prism diagonal here. I have one of these. I use these diagonals for my personal scopes all the time. Okay, I've had these for many years, and a good number of years. And on an FC 100, for example, remember that those little scopes are only 740 millimeters. Even if you use an 1.25" diagonal, you can use an 1.25" wide field, like a 24 millimeter wide field eyepiece, and you can get a huge field of view. So you don't have to always use a 2-inch diagonal with these little refractors. Now, some of the Mulons are anywhere from, I don't know, a couple of thousand on up to a few thousand millimeters, on up in focal length. So you find yourself needing to use 2-inch diagonals so you can use these longer focal length eyepieces like what you see here. This is a 50 millimeter LE, eyepiece here that I use in a Mulon, which I've had for a while now, many years. And I have here a LE because Takahashi also makes a series of eyepieces like the Tak LEs. These are very well-known eyepieces. You guys have seen these. And I really love these things. They got beautiful, clean build stops. They have very neutral color fidelity. They're just super nice. And so I'll use those with that. So don't worry so much. Now, if you're curious about, fields of view, there's a website that I use. It's called Astronomy Tools Field of View Calculator. And you can just go into Google and punch in Astronomy Tools Field of View Calculator. And what it allows you to do is to put in the focal length, and a lot of imagers use this too. You can use, it has like different cameras, any brand of telescope in it. Astronomy Tools Field of View Calculator, you put in the focal length, put in the focal length, the scope, the diameter, the focal length of the eyepiece, and the apparent field of view. And then you can click on any image and it will show you a picture of how that object will fit into the field of view. And it's a very helpful tool because a lot of people are like, they don't understand why they're buying a 2-inch eyepiece other than, somebody told them to use a 2-inch eyepiece. Get one, you can get the widest field of view. But that's not always the case. Believe it or not, for myself, the vast majority of the time that I'm using my refractors, probably 80 to 90% of the time, I'm using an 1.25" eyepiece similar to this one or, some other one. And that's what I prefer. There's no bevels you'll see on here, so I can just interchange them. So if I'm looking at double stars, I want high magnification or low, I can just switch them out immediately because sometimes you get these compression rings and the eyepieces get snagged on them and it kind of can move the scope or something. You don't want that to happen. So I just like to do that. On the Mulon, however, because the focal length is so long, I usually am using 2-inch eyepieces anywhere from, 15 on up to 30 millimeters on and more. But I will tell you that because the Mulon 180 is so small in aperture, it's that point where it's so easy to acclimate that scope. It's so forgiving compared to the bigger brothers, and I love it for that reason. It's so lightweight. It's just the cutest little scope. And if you want a personal opinion, if you want portability and you want to complement a 4-inch refractor, go with the the 180. If you have a 5-inch refractor and you want to complement a 5-inch refractor with a bit more aperture, you could look at the 210. The 250 to me is a great complement to my 6-inch refractor, and I interchange between the two. And that's another thing I mentioned earlier is I love equatorial mounts because you can switch the tube on it. If you want to view with a Cassegrain, take your refractor off, put your Cassegrain off, or vice versa. It's limitless. You can do imaging with it. You can do visual viewing with it. And it's a really nice and convenient way to observe. So as we get further into the year, a planet season is approaching. We have a big Mars opposition. And now that people are home, we're probably going to have more time. And I'm looking forward to observing Mars this year. It's going to be pretty big. And October, it's going to be a pretty good size. So I want to just give you guys a tip that helped me, and I learned this through veteran observers that knew a hell of a lot more than I know, that I learned from Charlton Flats. And one of them is when you're viewing at night, I just want to talk about dark adaptation. And I've discussed this in the forums on cloudy nights, and those who know me know I've discussed this. I've explained numerous times why I love viewing in the city more than dark skies. When you're viewing in dark skies, you're using the rods of your eyeball, and the rods are on the outer portion of your eye, and you're using what's called scotopic vision. And scotopic vision is relying on those rods to collect that light. And that's why when you kind of look off to the side, it's easier. You detect light a little bit better when you use what's called averted vision. Some people use averted imagination where they think they're seeing things. So I call it averted imagination. But averted vision allows you to see fainter objects, and you look off to the side. And what's happening is rhodopsin is this protein that goes in your eye, and it takes about 20 minutes for rhodopsin, it's protein, to get into your eyes. You have to respect the physiological effects and the consequences that this has when you view. But the rods don't see things in color very well. And not only that, the rods don't see things very sharply. So what was happening is I was viewing in my yard, and I discovered this by accident, and I will share this with you from my own personal experience. And I was coming into the kitchen, I was viewing planets, and I would come into the kitchen, and I was having these 10-minute coffee breaks, and the kitchen was well lit up. And what was happening was that my photopic vision, which is what you see with the cones near the center of your eye, your pupils start to contract. And what happened is when I went back out and I look in the eyepiece, I went, oh my God, what is this? And I kept noticing that the planets look really crisp and sharp. So they didn't look like they were saturated with all this light scattering. Because my eyes, what's happening is that when you're using your cones of your eyes, the center, okay, and you're using your photopic vision, you're seeing colors really good, and you're seeing everything razor sharp. So you don't want to be dark adapted. So for nighttime, you can use a red flashlight. One of the ways that I prevent myself from being dark adapted, the same thing applies to the moon, and to some extent, even with double stars, depending on how bright they are. If they're too faint, then obviously you want to be more dark adapted so you can pick up that light. But nevertheless, it's amazing what happens to you when your eyes are not dark adapted with the moon and planets, and it's comfortable to view them, and you see them very sharp. Some of the best views of the planets and the moon you will ever get is right at sundown. And there's a couple of reasons for that. I mean, one, you're using your photopic vision, using those cones in your eye. So your eyes are not dark adapted. And the planets look really sharp against a lit background. And it's a beautiful sight. One of the greatest views of Jupiter I ever saw in my life was right at sundown before I could see any stars at all in the sky. I was using my 10-inch reflector, and it just really astonished me, and it really hit me hard. That experience really hit me hard. So one of the techniques I use is I will take a white sheet of paper like this, and I'll shine a white light on it, or keep a white light on my desk, and I'll look at it constantly when I'm viewing the planet. So I'll be looking in the eyepiece like this, and then I'll look over here at the white light reflecting off the paper to prevent my eyes from dark adapting. So it's just a technique that you could consider. I think there's a question here. Let me just see if I'm missing something. Love the talk DF, but I want to know your opinion on the TSA 120. Is it worth the upgrade from the DF? Yeah, this is a good question. I didn't talk about airy discs. Is it worth the upgrade? That's a difficult question to answer. The TSA 120 is a super popular scope because when you go from a TSA 120 to a TOA 130, for example, it's a pretty hefty jump as far as weight for the additional 10 millimeters of aperture you get. So opinions vary on that. If you feel that you have the right mount you can use the same mount that you're using with your 4-inch, and you want to go to a TSA 120, you can do it. Every bit of addition, there's two ways I answer these questions. Every bit of aperture will help to a trained eye. But if you're just a casual observer and the seeing isn't good and you're just, glancing at stuff, the differences are not going to strike you. The differences happen when you're actually staring at these subjects for long periods of time and you're actually concentrating and looking at specific features on the surfaces, or say on the moon. I mentioned the lunar domes on the moon. There's these really delicate lunar domes. Sometimes when you just go up a little bit in aperture, you can resolve them, and then you go down, you can't. It's all relative. So I couldn't really say, is it worth? I wish I could answer. It's just hard to answer that question because it's all relative. I think it's the most important thing is to be a good observer. Look at Stephen O'Meara. Look at the books that he published using a 4-inch telescope. They're astonishing. It's a masterpiece. This guy goes to these volcanoes, these dark skies in Hawaii, and he sketches. I have so much regard for this guy. He's just amazing. And he sketches these things. And I think the ability to resolve and see detail comes from you, the observer. The scope can only do so much. Like I say, additional aperture, it'll help you a little bit. But, try to be a better observer. Look at your seeing conditions. Learn about your seeing conditions. Like, for example, when I'm out, if I don't see water vapor, like I don't see onshore flow, then that's indicating to me that the air is not stable. And it's usually stable here. I go into the valley, and temperatures, as I mentioned earlier, they're just dropping, and that wreaks havoc on telescopes. Another thing I want to mention with regard to the Mulans, particularly the 180, when you increase, you can go to what's called the Pickering scale. Damian Peach has a Pickering scale, and he has an animation that he made for it. It goes from 1 to 10. And one of the things you'll see is all this scintillating. You have to remember that when you increase the aperture, right, there's more scintillating involved on the stars. And as you decrease it, your airy disk, that little dot in the center that you see, it looks bigger. The more aperture you have, the airy disk gets tinier and tinier. And so it's hard to see these bullseyes or these beautiful pinballs that you see. And that's why I use refractors to look at double stars, because they have less resolving power. The more resolving power you see on a telescope, the more resolving power you have, the tinier and tinier the airy disk gets. And so you see more of this stuff, this extraneous junk around the airy disk. And it can be quite distracting if the scopes get too big an aperture. I think there was another question. Let me see if I miss it. Filter. Oh yeah, I know. Question. This is a good question. People are talking about this question here about how do you apply a filter on a CB. So here's an example of I'll tell you that in just a second, how you can do this. A couple of ways that you can add a filter, because it's a good question. This comes up sometimes. On some digital SLR cameras, you have clip-in filters, which you could do. If you're not, there are these new filters that are coming out now for these T-mounts, these T-threads that are part of these cameras, like ZWO, for example. You'll have these T-mounted threads in here, and they're making filters now that can actually insert inside, which is really cool. So you can thread the camera on to the T adapter, and the filter will be inside there. The other option, which I don't have with me here, is a filter slide. And sometimes you can add what's called a filter slide to it. I think Bader Planetarium makes a filter slide. There's also one that Dean at Starizona makes that we sell as well, that you can put a filter in, like a 48 millimeter filter. But it's a difficult question to answer. There's so many different scenarios. I talk to friends of mine in the industry that work, and we're always challenged. There's like so many different cameras now. There's so many adapters, so many different reducers. There's so much stuff now that it's difficult. You have to sometimes do a little bit of research. Even I myself am challenged with it. So you're not alone. Don't feel like you're like alone with this. And we don't have the answers all the time, but we do our best to try and find out those answers. And we don't have them on the spot. We'll find out when we get back to you on it. But check out the system charts to know what your adapters are. But to answer that, thread-in filters and also filter slides. And the filter slides, I think, occupy about roughly 20 millimeters of back focus. So you got to look at you got to Google back focus distances. I don't know if we have the chart on our website at telescopes.net. That's something we could probably do, but we can put all the back focus distances to all the talks. They are in all the brochures. I do have, for example, one of the things that they give out at NEAF, which is really cool, are these beautiful colored brochures from Takahashi. You can see an epsilon in here, and they tell you the back focus distances on these things. You can see all these really nice scopes in here, and there's like the Mulans and everything, in there. And they give you we list some of the recommended flatteners and reducers to use with them. So I see a thanks, Dr. D. Okay, you bet. Yeah, so hopefully that answers that question. So I hope this has been somewhat helpful for you guys. Adam Block is going to be getting on, I think at about 2 o'clock. I think his time is on there. And we're going to be, like I say, we're going to be doing more videos as we go on. I'm just looking to think just one thing as I'm going here, because this wasn't rehearsed. I'm just kind of going here. A couple of things I forgot to mention is collimation. I personally, for me, the way I collimate my Mulons, when on the newer models, they have collimation, you can do front and rear. Remember, the screws are on the front. So I will point at a bright star and have the scope kind of angled up, and I will adjust the screws in the front to collimate these scopes, and I'll look at the star test to see if it looks oblong. And you can go online. There's video tutorials on how to do, collimating Cassegrains. SCTs are a lot easier to collimate because the screws are simpler. But on the Mulons, like my 250, they use 6 screws, like a push-pull mechanism. And so typically, if you are going to collimate a Mulon, there's aftermarket collimators like the Hotech, where you can set up an apparatus. Darren that works with me sometimes, he'll use that so he can do it indoors, and it works quite accurately. I've noticed that when you're out at night, you may or may not need just the most minimal tweak to make it really good, But typically, me personally, I use stars. The secondaries are dotted on the new scopes, at least on the 250, as far as I know from what I saw on the CRS. This here is a collimator. These are typically used for the doublets. This is a Takahashi collimator that I have in my hand here. And basically the way that it works is it threads on back of the scope here, and then what you do is you attach it to the rear and you look through this eyepiece. You'll notice this little window. So what I'll do is I'll attach it to the scope like so, and the device will go in there like that. And this is basically what you'll see. And what happens is that as you slide this tube forward and backwards, you'll notice this glowing light and you're trying to get that glow, that symmetry back and forth in there with it. And I take a flashlight, and a really bright LED flashlight, or like an iPhone or whatever, if you have a flashlight on your phone, just set the phone in upside down with the light going up into it, and then you can look at it while you're. Now when you're using this with a refractor, you have to put the dust cap on. It needs to be dark inside the tube. You can also use them to collimate the Mulon series telescopes as well. Howie Glatter, which is now run by Starlight Instruments, they're doing all the manufacturing. They have these things that are holographic lasers that you can project onto the walls. Those things work amazing. I don't care how complicated your collimation seems, like how many different parts of the scope collimate, whether it be the focuser, the rear, the secondary. Those things are, in my opinion, are really amazing because you see the projection on the wall, and it's so easy to tweak them. I just want to see if I'm missing anything here. We've got some questions coming in. What about collimating the Epsilon? Yeah, good question. The Epsilons are tricky. They have an offset. So when you look at the manual, don't be alarmed when you see the offset. It looks like it's not tweaked. But you have the ability to do primary and secondary. So it's like a conventional Newtonian. And in the manual, you can download these manuals. We have them on our website. Click on those things and look at the recommendations on doing them. But there's sight tubes and devices that you can use to collimate these laser collimators. There's opinions vary, on doing them. But when you're just doing a Mulon or something, you can collimate on stars. They're easier to do because you're just adjusting the secondary. But for Newtonian type telescopes, you may have a situation where you might need to adjust the primary mirror or the secondary mirror. Howie Glatter has the Blug. And the Blug, basically, I don't have one with me, but it has a angled opening so that you can see the reflections, from the back of the scope. Back in the early days, you used to have 2 people adjusting while one was looking, so they've made it easier to do it now with these things like the plug, or where you have this 45-degree angle face on the collimator to see it from the rear. So just Google on collimating Newtonians to get a better idea. That will help you with it. Let's see if I got standardization. Why does talk have such a bad standardization? I don't know. I didn't know it was an issue, but might be a good question. But I guess they have their own kind of proprietary things. And well, you may have a unique situation where you need to go to what's called precise parts. Everybody knows about precise parts, where you'll get like a CAD drawing of a part that you might need to have customized. But it's a good question. Maybe those are the things. It's unfortunate. But one of the things you could do is talk to Chris over at Takahashi and share your opinions. And because what we need to do is we need your feedback. We rely on your feedback as well to make improvements. They've asked for my feedback, and I do that. But Chris Heisinger at Takahashi is really great with me, and we communicate regularly. Almost every few days we're on the phone, and he's just been absolutely wonderful to work with, and his wife Marcy and Marina and everybody there. They've been very helpful. Make suggestions, and they'll relay that information to Japan. And as things evolve, they can probably change things as we go. It's point 24. Hello. Hi to you all over there. And thank you all, so much for the support. So I don't think I missed anything. I hope that this review has been helpful to you guys to some extent. Visit our website at telescopes.net. We've got so many stuff, things on the website. We're still shipping. We're going to continue to do that. You can call us on the phone. You can call us on our toll-free number at 888-427-8766. You guys know I've repeated that 1,000 times on the videos that we do. And Simon has been wonderful. Simon and I have worked together, and we've done lots of videos together. And Simon, he's such a talented person, and with his imaging and stuff. And I do work with a lot of the imaging stuff, but I've worked a lot with the visual, and Simon does a lot of the photography, but we both dabble in each side, a little bit. So check us out, and thanks for joining us. And I suppose if you don't have any more questions, stick around, because we're going to have Adam Block coming in here with you shortly. And don't hesitate to call me. You're welcome to call me on the phone if you want to talk to me personally. You guys can PM me on Cloudy Nights. You know me, I'm going to be on Cloudy Nights. I'm going to try and get in there more. I haven't been able to get onto Cloudy Nights a lot lately because I've been so consumed with my family. And I want to thank Kurt Grosjean, my manager, who's working nonstop to keep things going at the store, and Farah and Steve Silber and Irma and Sandy and Dan Yagi, who does our warehouse and stuff. But we're all communicating and trying to keep things going. And I want to thank all my friends for watching this video. I have so many friends I love in this industry, have been so supportive to us during this difficult time. And we're doing pretty well considering. And I also want to wish my best to all my competitors on the East Coast and everyone who are in our telescope industry, and friends that I love and care for. I mean, I would just say this wholeheartedly, and I get a little bit emotional. I'm sorry. This is a hard time, and I'm really serious. What's going on with the industry, but my heart goes out to everybody. Thank you. I'll see you about it. Okay.